when you show up with, what do they call it, a 2-ton truck or whatever it is, everybody's sitting around eating Jimmy John's, it just slows down the process. Check. We're good? I can start talking? Okay. Does your camera matter? That's a loaded question. I mean, it matters if you know how to tell a story, right? And if you're using it to tell a story. But if you're using a camera as a reason to why you're not able to do something, that's bullshit, because nowadays cameras are so cheap. Anybody can get a Sony Alpha camera, and a Sony Alpha camera does all the things, right? You got great color with Cinetone, you got 4K 120, 4K 60, I think you can go up to 240 and 1080. You know what I mean? You can take amazing photos, but if you don't know how to use those things to tell a story, and you use them to just show that, oh, I have an expensive camera, then that's where I kind of get like, okay, like, you don't really need this camera. You really need to learn how to tell a story, because at the end of the day, we've all started out with nothing. I definitely didn't have all the gear that I have now when I started, and I would probably say for the first like couple years, I had 2 shitty Tamron lenses, and I thought I was the man when I got a 50 millimeter 1.9 off of eBay from some dude in Seattle. I shot everything with that 50 1.9 because I thought shallow depth of field was the shit, and it was a manual lens, and that's all I had. For me, it was like, okay, this is all I have, but I'm still going to be able to tell a story and do the right things and all this cool stuff. I think now there's so much available that people get caught up in shit that doesn't really matter. People get caught up in all the features, not knowing how to use them or why to use them or how to use them, and it paralyzes them on set. They're fumbling around with menus and all this kind of stuff, and they're not able to execute as quickly as possible. So cameras are important, but know what camera to use, know why you need this camera, what's the purpose of this. Don't just have a red camera to say you got a red camera. I did that. I had 2 of them. I got rid of that shit because I wasn't using it. It was too slow. It didn't work for my workflow. And the documentary cameras, the mirrorless cameras that Sony have out, FX3, FX6, FX9, we kill shit with those cameras. And that's how we operate. So for me, that's all. Those cameras work for me. Could you do all this stuff with an iPhone? No, it's going to be a different type of storytelling. It's going to be a different type of gear setup, and that might work for some people, but for me, that's not what I use. There's a time and a place for that. I hear that argument all the time. Well, why don't you? Yeah, you could do it on your iPhone, knock yourself out. It's not going to be the same. iPhone's probably got another 5 or 6 years before they catch up to what Sony's already doing. So there you have it with does the camera matter? The importance of confidence as a shooter, it's something that a lot of people don't talk about. I think it's extremely important, especially these days. Like for me and my crew, a lot of the times we shoot, and I think people say predator, producer, editor. I don't like that word for obvious reasons. But a lot of the times the shooter ends up doing a lot of the producing and directing on site, right? Because we move in small crews, 2-3 people, and we make it happen. I'm not a big crew, 30, 40 people sitting around. I can't stand that shit. That's just not how we operate here. But so in operating as a shooter, editor, director on site, confidence is extremely important, because without confidence, you can't really direct and tell people what you're trying to pull out of them on camera. There's a difference between just saying action and letting the camera roll versus letting someone know, all right, cool, that was great, but this time let's try and do it like this, because they might think they're doing one thing, but through the viewfinder, through the lens, or through your headphones, you understand that you're not getting what you need to tell that story, and somebody that's super quiet or overly introverted, that's not comfortable telling someone, hey, that's not what we were looking for, can you do it again, isn't going to be able to catch that moment or pull that moment out of somebody on camera. So that's why it's extremely important, if you really want to be good, if you're a videographer or a content creator on site with people, you're going to need to speak up and be confident, because I would say 60% of the time, you're not going to get exactly what you were trying to get the first time around. The chances of that goes up if you're shooting for narrative, right? If you got lines, if you're trying to do blocking and have things fall in place, you know, in the viewfinder or whatever, you're going to need to do things multiple times, especially when you're first starting out. And in order to do that, you have to be super confident. Hey, cut. All right, let's do that one more time. All right, cool. Let's back this up. All right, hey, you got to fly away. Let's move your hair back a little bit because it got in your face. Or, oh, yeah, I don't like the way the lighting looks. Take 5 minutes. Let me fix this again, and then let's come back to it. You have to be able to do those things. It's going to give you a better product, and it's going to make you a better on-site person. And people appreciate you even when you got to say, hey, it wasn't the best, let's do it again. They appreciate that because at the end of the day, they know that you're trying to bring the absolute best out of them on camera for the whatever brand story that you're trying to tell. I think asking questions is one of the most important skills that you can have. It's not necessarily running your mouth. Yes, you need to know how to sell and get in front of a client, but when it's time to learn about a business or learn about a brand and how you can create content or whatever it is around it to help it grow, you have to ask questions and you have to be really good at listening. I always compare it to going to a doctor's office, and if you go into a doctor's office and they just give you a bunch of pills and it's like, hey, just take this shit and you'll feel better tomorrow, you're probably going to look at them like you're crazy, versus somebody's like, okay, what hurts? Does this hurt? Does this hurt? And then they prescribe you what you need that's going to make you feel the best, right? If you go into a situation and you're just talking about how amazing you are as a content creator or, you know, as an editor or whoever you are, without understanding what they need, obviously they're hiring you for a reason, right? What are your goals here? What are you looking to do with this project? Who is your audience? You know, how many deliverables are you looking for? How fast do you need this project delivered? All these things affect your creation process during the start to finish part of a project. You know, you're not gonna attack every project the exact same way because every project needs specific needs. And if you don't ask those questions at the very beginning, what's going to happen is there's going to be miscommunication. And we all know with any personal or business relationship, with bad communication equals a terrible, bad, and relationships that's very dysfunctional. And you end up losing that client, and you end up losing future opportunities to work with that client. So for me, asking questions is one of the things that I really enjoy doing. I think I'm really good at asking questions, and in doing that, I'm able to deliver people above and beyond what they initially came to me for. Bigger crew versus smaller crew. I'm not a big crew guy. Every experience I've ever had working with big crews, and when I say big crews, I'm talking, you know, union stuff or, you know, any kind of situation where there's people on sites sitting around with like holding extension cords and have tool belts on, and they're really not doing anything but getting in the way. Again, that might work. That works for certain things. Like, you know, I'm not a Hollywood guy. I'm not that kind of thing. But for what we do, for the documentary / narrative / commercial work that we do, 9 times out of 10, you got 2 guys on set. You got Lydia Smith up in the front in pre-production. You got Chris and Elizabeth on the back end in editing, and that's how we get most things done. You know, I've worked alongside larger agencies, and I know with that, every time something happens, you got to go through 3, 4, 5 account managers. You know, and what does that do for you, right? It slows down the process for the client. It costs the client more money. Communicating amongst the crew becomes a nightmare because nobody can get shit done effectively and on time because everything has to be approved by a million people. You know, so when building out processes here at INDIRAP, whether it be for creative or for on-site production, delivery, everything, I keep it simple and stupid. Right? I keep it simple and stupid. KISS. Because that's how you get things done. You don't need a million people on site. People don't actually like that. And, you know, for a lot of the clients we work with a lot of corporate clients and things like that. A lot of these workspaces or, you know, going to resorts or hotels or whatever this is, developments. You don't want to disturb the people that live there or work there. And when you show up with, what do they call it, a 2-ton truck or whatever it is with all this shit and everybody's sitting around eating Jimmy John's, it just slows down the process. If you strip all that down, you focus on telling the story, and you get people that actually know how to execute at a very high level on set, there's no need for a big crew, not in my world. The importance of creating client avatars. I think before you do anything creative, if you're working with, you know, a client of any type, that's the most important part because until you understand who you're delivering content for, what they do, what kind of things they're interested in, where do they go for lunch, 25 to 35, 35 to 45, what their age is, where they're from, basically their target demographics. You don't know what the hell to create content around, and if you're just creating random content for the sake of it, in the long run, when you start distributing this content, it's not going to hit right? Because if you're delivering generalized content for a business that makes hoses for landscaping companies, and most of that audience is 35 to 50, say 45 to 55, the buyers that are doing that, but you're creating a bunch of younger facing content to women that necessarily aren't in that space or make up the target demographic of your buyer, your content's just not going to be received the same way. So that's why I always say, understand your client avatar, and in doing that, sitting around with your team, sitting with the client and talking about who these people are, what they do, and what's going to resonate with them the most. That's how you're going to create the content that is going to hit the best when you go to distribute it. So, jumping into content creation without doing that, you're doing yourself a disservice. Doesn't matter if you're a Fortune 5 brand, if you're a small business. It's probably the most important step in the process, because also when it comes to pre-production, which is also, for us, it's the most important part. But for a brand, it's really about understanding your client avatar. You can't really do pre-production for a product or service if you don't understand the audience. The audience is that client avatar that I keep talking about here. You can't just say, hey, let's create a video for this product. Can we shoot tomorrow? Of course we can shoot tomorrow, but who the fuck are we shooting for? Who's the audience? What do they look like? What do they love to do? All those things are super important if you're going to create content that's going to hit the right way with your audience. Biggest project I've ever taken down definitely has to go to the Miraval Resorts and Spas project. I shot for 3 weeks straight. First week I was in Austin. Second week I was in Tucson, Arizona. Second or third week I was in Berkshires. And we literally shot for 3 weeks straight. There were no days off. Every day it was a full 8-9 hour shoot day straight through, and went all the way up. The day we wrapped, we went back on the plane, went to the next location, and shot straight through. So shot for 3 weeks straight, got back, jumped right into editing this, because this was a project that I held dear to heart. I really want to bring it to life, so I put my hands on it myself and end up editing probably about 65 to 70% of that project, the first round that we did it. And I don't know how many deliverables. I want to say it's in the 80s, 80 something deliverables, probably a little bit more, because I know we did some soundscape stuff that Christian and Chris had delivered. But I personally edited about I'm going to say 65% of that. So in all of the shoot and in the pre-production, you know what I mean? This was a huge project, working with the people over at Miraval and Hyatt, coming up with this concept with Lydia, putting it all in the form, coming up with questions, storyboards, locations, all this kind of stuff. And on top of all of that, when it happened, it was COVID. You know what I mean? That shit happened. So we had, it was snowing in Austin. It was crazy. But shooting for 3 weeks straight, coming back and editing that and delivering it and knocking it out of the park, it was something that, me and my crew were super proud of. It was me, Peter, and Chris Costoso, and then Paul that did it. I don't think there's many other crews that could have did what we did the way we did it at that level. So thanks to those dudes. But yeah, that was the biggest project. We smashed that shit. And it's definitely one of my proudest achievements as a content creator. The importance of good customer service is that there is nothing without it. Again, you can deliver the greatest product in the world as a content creator, but again, if there was miscommunication up front, if it took you 3 months to deliver it, if you never said thank you, if you're not able to translate the person's request when it comes to editing into the final product, and that something that should have took like 2 back and forths, 2 revisions, ends up taking 10 revisions. And yeah, at the end, they got the product that they wanted to, but they did it by walking through glass and fucking nails, working with you, because you don't know how to communicate. You're very passive aggressive, and you don't know how to swallow your pride and just deliver an amazing product for someone, your great product doesn't matter anymore, because that person's never going to refer you, and people will remember something bad about you or a bad experience and tell other people about it, before they say that you were the greatest videographer in the world. So customer service is extremely important. I definitely would recommend learning, and having a process for onboarding clients all the way out through on-site, through delivery, and the follow-up, so that you could potentially work with them again. It's super important. It's one of the reasons why we're here a decade later here at INDIRAP.